sacred landscapes, sacred skies, early settlers, themes and peoples, power and warfare, a pantheon of gods, honouring the gods, tales of the gods, creation and the first peoples, leaving this earth, a new god. And then glossary index. at the start of these quipus represents the name for Peru, and the patterns of colour combinations and string lengths appear to rank 3 levels of authority among them. Explorers and archaeologists. This is Alexander von Humboldt, who made the first attempt to collect Inca and pre-Inca antiquities and to understand their sequence. This is Alphus Stubble at the Gateway of the Sun, Middle Horizon, Tiwanaku. He published his notes with Max Uhl in 1892. Modern investigators. And then history. The vast continent of South America may form a more or less separate physical unit, but the ancient peoples who once lived there never formed a single culture. For this reason, we cannot assess the continent as a whole, but need to describe the people, culture, religion, and mythology of each of many different groups. Urban-based societies were confined to the Andes Mountains and nearby western coastal valleys and deserts. Cultures that built ceremonial centres, governed large areas and developed advanced metalwork, pottery, textiles and stone carving technologies in present-day western Venezuela, Colombia, Peru, Bolivia, northern Chile and northwestern Argentina. In this book, this area is defined as the Andean area. Peoples elsewhere in South America developed sophisticated societies with complex religious beliefs, but they did not build monumental ceremonial centres or cities, develop technology of quite the same complexity, or build kingdoms and empires. The nature of the landscape itself provided stimuli for civilized societies to develop. Within a relatively small area, the land ranges from Pacific coastal plains and deserts, with coastal valleys ascending east into the Andean foothills to high mountain valleys and plateau, then to the eastern Andean slopes, descending to the high pampas and rainforests. A key which is AD 1400 to 1532, the Inca Empire and Spanish conquest. Empire of the Sun. The Incas were a small group or tribe, numbering perhaps 40,000 individuals or fewer in the Huantenay, Cusco Valley of modern central Peru. They were one group among many in the valley. Through conquest, first locally then beyond the valley, they built the largest empire that ever existed in the Americas. At its greatest extent in AD 1530, its northern border coincided roughly with the modern Ecuadorian Colombian border. Its southern extent stretched to modern central Chile. To the east it claimed regions into the lowlands, bordering the Amazon rainforest, and to the west it met the Pacific Ocean. Yet the Incas' rise to power lasted less than 100 years, and during the whole of this time they were engaged in wars of conquest or in the civil war at the end of this period. Pachacuti Inca Yupanqui founded the imperial state of the Incas, and under his rule the Incas continued to dominate the Cusco Valley. As the empire expanded, vast networks of roads were built to unite its four corners, coupled with impressive architectural and engineering feats that enabled planned towns and cities, with great monuments to be built. Bridges were built, and existing systems of terracing and irrigation expanded. When the Spaniards, under the leadership of Francisco Pizarro, first arrived, the empire was still being expanded, but by the time of their third visit, the empire was split by civil war. This war led eventually to the death of two rival sons of the Inca ruler, Huayna Capac, and the victory of Pizarro. So this very striking image on the left, the skilled metallurgists of the La Tolita culture were among many to depict the sun as a rayed golden mask. Land of the Four Quarters. necessary part of everyday life, although we call it myth today. Andean people's beliefs and their perception of the universe was their religion. A pantheon of gods, sanctity permeated the ancient Andean world. Sacred powers were everywhere, in all living things. Survival in this world, the land of the living, was dependent not only on producing enough to eat, but also on revering the gods and appeasing them through rituals, sacrifices and offerings. At the same time, there was a fatalism in the belief in the great cycle of being, of life and death, which gave rise to the reverence of ancestors. The peoples of the Andean area held a range of beliefs and to appear to have worshipped a pantheon of deities with control over different aspects of nature. Their religious beliefs developed from the earliest times, and they can be detected in the architecture and art of the earliest Andean civilizations. Many deities were universally accepted throughout the Andean area, sometimes called by different names, but having the same essential attributes, powers and roles. A linking factor throughout Andean life was that of continuity, of how all things are connected and so part of a cycle, and this was demonstrated through the concepts of mutual exchange, duality, and collectivity, which were all vital parts of spiritual and daily life for ancient Andeans. Themes and beliefs. Through Andean history, common themes were expressed in art and architecture. Coastal animals and motifs were copied in highland traditions and vice versa. The early combination of temple platforms and sunken courts shows this exchange of ideas in the architectural elements of the ceremonial centre. Platforms mimic mountain peaks and plateau, while sunken courts mimic valleys and coastal desert oases. It can be argued that ritual progression through such ceremonial complexes reflects the symbiotic relationship between highland and lowland cultures and between mountains and coastal deities. So, in this object here, an early intermediate period Nazca Bridge. Spouted pot depicts the oculate being, accompanied by trophy heads. This architectural combination also shows the early appearance of the Andean concept of duality, the late pre-ceramic period union of platform mound and sunken court, both in highland and lowland sites, constituted the first widespread Andean religion. To agricultural peoples, the sunken court was probably the focus for the worship of Mother Earth, for the ritual reenactment several phases of creation, destruction and recreation. This progression was held to reflect the gods' desire to create an increasingly perfected form of humans. Honour and worship of the gods was so important that it took several efforts to create beings of proper humility. This veneration was essential because it was known that at the slightest provocation they were capable of destroying the world. In this image we have long-distance trade contacts, also spread imagery. Here a rainforest monkey decorates a coastal desert Nazca ceramic vessel. And this looks like a piece of cloth, an Inca textile showing a deity or a shaman impersonating a god with sky snake image and the stance of the staff deity. The relationship maintained between ancient Andeans and the universe can be characterized as ecological because they perceived their environment as sacred. They believed that they were on Earth not to exploit it, but rather to enjoy its benefits through the grace of the gods. The relationship was one of deity power and human supplication. Humans considered themselves to be not the centre or focus of the world, but only one group among all living things, including animals, plants and the stars. Thus, humans appealed to the gods for their permission to make use of the various other elements of the world. Indeed, the animals, plants and stars were rather more important than humans, for it was in them that the gods were personified. Following the fundamental Andean belief in duality, the universe and everything in it comprised two parts in opposition, but striving for completion through unity, thus male-female, light-dark, hot-cold, good-evil, the sun, the moon. To civilizations based primarily on agriculture for their day-to-day existence, the natural world and its physical forces represented essential elements of survival. The natural elements were considered divine and ruled human existence as evidence of the gods' powers. Ancient Andeans naturally sought to give the deities and their powers forms in representational art and architecture, and common themes can be detected from at least the initial period in its ceremonial architecture. Everything is connected. Mutual duality or reciprocity was a major feature of the ancient Andean worldview. It comprises the viewpoint that for every idea or object there is a reciprocal part or counterpart. Through reciprocity, therefore, all things in the world are connected. So here, in this image, frequent use of sheet gold, the sweat of the sun, reflects its use as the representative of the sun. And this Nazca ceramic effigy vessel depicts perhaps the most universal symbols of reciprocity, man and woman. Throughout Andean art, there is an emphasis on duality or as two identical crabs or birds, or as double-headed creatures facing in opposite directions. So here we have llama effigy figures. Llama herding for wool and other products was also state-controlled. Collectivity was the overriding mode of operation in Inca and their predecessors' society. Corporate thinking demanded that the group always took precedence over the individual, since the individual was part of the whole and could not function effectively except as part of the whole. Collectivity complements reciprocity in the idea that all things are connected and therefore part of a whole and of the cycle of the universe. As a supreme example, the Inca in Thai shows reciprocity and collectivity at the same time. As the earthly representative of Inti, the sun, he was an intermediary between the people and the gods, and thus part of the collectivity that was necessary for the whole to function effectively. In contradiction of this, however, he was individual and supreme above all other Incas. Andean artistic collectivity is shown by a general sparsity of portraiture, historical detail and narrative. The details of special features, physical location or the acts of specific people are usually unimportant. It is the person's role that is important to show, and religious art overridingly features supernatural imagery. The deities have aspects by which they can be recognised, and it is these aspects that must be shown accurately. Artistic decoration emphasises continuous and repetitious patterning, itself an obvious manifestation of corporateness. As early as the initial period, the architectural monolithic mosaic at Serra Sechin shows this concept. Forming converging processions of figures and banners, rather than representing individuals, the figures are stylized representations of warriors and captives in a procession of conquest, triumph and sacrifice, a tinku ritual, and conversions of duality in ceremonial temple architecture. Ancient Americans throughout the North and South American continents believed that the universe exists